Deputy Maureen O'Sullivan.
Right, good morning. Ar dús bhhailm buíochas chuig teachtadála Tom Fleming de ar nubair a dhéon sé gur an gó coltaí príomháideacha seo atá phléigean in ucht agus a bhí á phléigean a réir. Agus tas nóg méid le scéal pásanta. I'm going to begin with a personal story that some years ago a young male relative of mine, while he was working abroad, he contracted a viral infection. And the hospital where he was being treated for that identified that he was going to need a heart transplant at some stage. He came back to Ireland, and it was very visible over the next year or so, the deterioration in him physically. And during that time, he was with the medical people, and they were trying various treatments and various medication and procedures with the heart section in the Mater Hospital. He eventually had to be taken into hospital because they too had identified that he needed a heart transplant. So he was connected with machines, and they were what was keeping him alive for these number of weeks. So visiting him in the Mater during those weeks, it was very obvious the care and the dedication of the team in the Mater Hospital. And of course we were also aware that in order for him to survive, for him to get that heart, it would mean another person losing his or her life. So in that space of hoping for life for him, we were also very conscious of the implications of that. There were a couple of weeks then spent visiting him, and then I remember getting a call one afternoon from his mother to say that a heart had become available, and would I come in and stay with them while they were waiting. I went straight to the hospital, and I can remember very clearly the emotion and the tension in that wait, because obviously they had to do the tests on the heart and various other procedures to see would it be a match. So we were waiting for that. And then once the word came that it was a match, I can remember the rush to get him into the operating theatre. The one thing that struck me was, I think that was about 11 o'clock at night, and we kind of thought we were going to be there all night. But the operation was relatively short, and it was only after a couple of hours that the surgeon came in to say that the operation had been successful. I'd love to say that it was a completely successful story. It wasn't, but he did get about 3 or 4 years with that new heart, which gave him a great life, a life that he hadn't had for the previous couple of years when his health was deteriorating. And he was unfortunately one of those people who did pass away in spite of getting that new heart. But I suppose being in that situation made me realise, if I hadn't realised it already, the importance of organ donation. I mean, I'd always carried a card, but I think it was that brought it home to me very much so, how vital it is that we are aware of the need for organ donors. I'm conscious of the other lives that might have been saved if more people carried organ donor cards, or if families or next of kin knew the wish of their loved ones to donate organs in the event of that happening. I think it really is important, as the motion states, to emphasise the incredible generosity of families who do give the consent for the donation, because it's at a time of great stress and great loss for them. The motion refers to the Spanish and Croatian experiences where there is a cost saving. Apart from the moral and the ethical reasons, there's also the economic one. And in Croatia, organ donation structures resulted in increased donation rates to 30 per million of the population, compared with 18 per million of the population in Ireland. And I think what was significant in Croatia is the network of hospital physicians responsible for organ donation within the intensive care units, and also that the legislation in Croatia was adjusted to include the opt-out, in keeping with Spain and Belgium and Austria and Portugal. So the countries who have put serious efforts in relation to organ donation and transplants have seen major benefits, both medical and financial. Ireland did have one of the highest rates of donation, but unfortunately we've seen a fall. And it's interesting to look that in 2010 it was a record low of 58 donations, 2011 a record high, and in 2012 the figures were below average at 17% less than the previous year. So the first step is the fact that we don't have legislation here, so getting that legislation is a major way forward. Another step, of course, is the intensified public awareness campaign to address the need for donors. And one aspect of that is the system of opted-in for organ donation. And if a person decides not to be part of the system, that they sign themselves out of the automatic donor involvement scheme. So those who don't wish to donate can have that opt-out, otherwise they're presumed to have opted in. But according to Mark Murphy of the Irish Kidney Association, even in countries which have the opt-out clause, the law still dictates that the relatives have the final say and can veto any decision. So presumed consent is not always feasible in practice. But if presumed consent is the way forward in Ireland, then the citizens have to know as much as possible and be informed as much as possible. Because I think a donor should be able to enjoy, and perhaps enjoy is not the right word, but at least have the satisfaction of knowing that they will be a donor if the situation arises. So I think a clear public campaign is needed so people know what they're doing and that what they're doing is a very important civic duty. And equally the campaign so that those who opt out will know this. And of course it has to be in language that can be understood by everybody, including those who have literacy issues. There's another point, and we do know that demand is outstripping supply, and organisations who we met, like the Falun Gong, will tell us of the growing black market for organs. So that can be eliminated if we all had the same system of presumed consent. I note that the Irish Medical Organisation a couple of years ago advocated for a hard mandated choice model, which takes away the burden of decision-making from the family, and that will help both the family and the medical workers during these times of traumatic or sudden death. I have to say that the team in the matter were excellent, and I can see the need for more teams, the trained personnel to coordinate the donor system, so that we do have qualified donor coordinators in hospitals across Ireland. And I suppose it's very important, I think, to acknowledge the 3 transplant programmes that we do have in Ireland, in Beaumont, in the Mater and St Vincent's. But there is a need, because of the increasing the pressures on them, that this is something that is not just confined to those 3 hospitals in Dublin. We know the cost effectiveness. Treatment for those waiting for organs costs the healthcare system more than the organ transplant operation. So investing in donor coordinators will be cost effective. And I read the article recently written by Professor Jim Egan in the Times, and he's also making the point of the need for an independent national organ procurement office. I think there is one other point, and that is that there are people who end up needing organs, and if we had different policies in this country in relation to alcohol, in relation to drugs, in relation to diet, that is another way in which to eliminate people from being on transplant lists. Professor Egan, in that article, wrote that there are 685 people waiting transplants, and I know the stress for us waiting on the transplant for that young cousin of mine, and I can only imagine what those families are going through now, waiting on another family to experience a loss and a distress so that their loved ones will have a chance of life. And I'll conclude with the quotation from Professor Egan saying that organ donation and transplantation in Ireland is at a crossroads. With both the proposed soft opt-out legislation and infrastructure support, there is an opportunity to provide enormous benefits for generations to come. And I think it's excellent that we've had another experience tonight of all across the board support on this motion.
Thank you very much, Deputy. Now I call on